Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. How are you guys doing this morning? I am wide awake. I was not able to sleep last night, so I am a bit dragging ass this morning, but that's all right. We will do the news nonetheless because news needs to be done. I hope you guys are doing okay so far. Like I said, I always say you guys can be under any person's voice this morning. Hell, you could still be in bed, you could be listening to the radio station, but you are under this voice, which makes me deeply appreciative of the fact that you are under this voice. It is presumptive of me to say this is going to be a damn good show, but I'm going to say it anyway. This is going to be a damn good show, and I'm glad that you all are here for it. If you all dig this content and you find yourself coming back to this show often, definitely give a like, share the content, share it far and wide. We are trying to reach 40K by the end of the year. It is a challenge, but we're still in the fight for that particular challenge. So definitely share it, like it, subscribe to it. If you guys definitely dig the content, you can always support this content through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, super chats or stickers, as they call them. All stickers and chats will be read, providing they're not racist, sexist, bigoted, etc. Even if you want to take the piss out of me, I would read those also. I want to go to my guests, though. We have an early start today, and I am always happy to talk to my man, Carl Jha. Carl Jha is the host of Silk and Steel podcasts, focused on China and surrounding areas and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk N, and subscribe and support their podcast on Patreon at Silk and Steel. Carl, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Hi, Jamar. Always good to see you.
It's always good to see you too, man. I always enjoy these conversations. I always come away with us learning something out of it. The reason why I hit you up, I was fascinated. Look, I have been fascinated by what has been taking place in South Korea. And recently, the defense minister, former defense minister, because he resigned, tried to hang himself with his underwear when he realized he was going to be arrested formally. Now, the president's office has been raided. So he has been forbidden to leave the country, the president that basically enacted the dictatorship for 4 hours. But what it boils down to, though, he's breaking the law. I mean, for one, he didn't necessarily have arguing that the opposition is powered by North Korea. And so I need to declare dictatorship to preserve democracy. It's just outrageous, right? On top of that, I am of mind that he didn't make this choice by himself. And what I mean by that, I strongly suspect that Donald Trump coming into office and this notion of what Trump may do is creating certain eddies around the globe, especially in regards to US clients. But give me your take on this very specific topic, though. What is your take on the South Korean thing? And do you think they're going to end up prosecuting the president of South Korea?
Well, let me tell you, Jamar, the details are now slowly coming out. Is even crazier than we initially thought. When the farcical coup ended, the ruling party of the president, Yoon, said, "Oh, this guy, he was just lonely." That's why, apparently the cure for male loneliness is to launch a self-coup. Of course, nobody bought that, and the investigation revealed pretty shocking truth. You already mentioned about the general who's about to kill himself, and it turns out
his name is Kim Jong-un. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Kim Jong-un?
Yes. So apparently the plan was to create a situation where there will be a military emergency on the Korean Peninsula. So they will justify to declare martial law. So initially, their initial plan was actually to provoke attack from North Korea. Yes, you heard that right. The original plan was to actually provoke an attack from North Korea. So to do that, the South Korean military actually flew several drones to Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, to spread propaganda flyers in hope to provoke some reaction from North Korea. So then they can militarily justify the martial law. But North Korean leadership didn't take the bite. And so that's why they have to fall back to the plan. They're just going to declare martial law. And so this lead me to believe that there's no way that U.S. was not involved, because
That's
in
my
a
point.
case of
Yeah, I'm
because in
sorry.
a case of, according to bilateral treaty between U.S. and South Korea,
Uh-huh.
in time of war, U.S. assumes operational control of the South Korean military. So there's no way that South Korean military is going to go on its own and say, let's provoke a conflict with North Korea, because there's no way they would not have done that without informing the U.S. Hey, we're about to do this. Please have our back in case North Korea attacks. And so this also explains the radio silence during the whole time when the coup was taking place. There was zero pip from any of the Western leaders, including United States, to condemn the South Korean president for basically choking off the South Korean democracy. There was none of that. They only made a statement after this. It looks the South coup failed, and then U.S. embassy in South Korea finally said, "Oh, we're glad about the President Yoon's decision to call off the martial law." But there was a long period of radio silence when none of the Western leaders who are champion of human rights and democracy and freedom has said anything about what the South Korean president was doing. And the plan for the South of the coup was to arrest the opposition leader Lee Jae-myung, and then and then round up all the people, the oppositional party in the parliament. I mean that's so. I mean the more detail coming up, more shocking it is. I mean at this point I'm 100% sure U.S. is informed. I mean,
Look,
if they weren't part of the planning, but they gotta be at least be informed. They knew what was going on.
When this first happened, I said to myself, when Donald Trump was coming into office, one of the things that he was doing was making peace with North Korea. It is pretty coincidental that on a random, Tuesday or something, that he just declares martial law just out the blue. And it's like, okay, well, that's weird. Why is he doing that? And, as you pointed out, this is a puppet of the US. How would they not know? Like, it's very bizarre. This president has been obsequious to the US, from my understanding, to an insane degree. And so it's like, would he really go through this without, like you said, either alerting the US or being given assurances that we would have his back if he did go through with it? I just think it's very, I mean, if you look at what's happening in Romania right now, if you look at what's happening in Romania, in Georgia, like these are pressures on governments that are either Eurosceptic or moving in a particular direction that they don't particularly like. It is very coincidental that they're trying to overthrow those governments also. Like, all of this stuff seems to be happening at the exact same time. It just looks very dodgy to me. What I mean, can they prosecute him? I mean, can they take him out of office or the presidency? I don't know how South Korea laws work in regards to the presidency.
Well, the parliament convened, they hold an impeachment of the president, but
Right.
the impeachment vote failed. And so now the South Korean newspaper published photo of all the lawmakers who voted against the impeachment of the president, and so like everybody is looking into their past history and their dealings. So one reason, by the way, they for one reason some of the crazier posting on X about the reason for the South Korean South coup, they were saying, oh, because the South Korean president is trying to stop the communists. They're trying to stop the socialists from taking over and stop this pro-Beijing candidate, this Manchurian candidate, from taking over South Korea. So this is referred to the main oppositional leader of South Korea, and his main Lee Jae-myung, and his major sin in these eyes of the Western neocons is in earlier this year during a rally, a pep rally, he said, like, why do we have to get involved in the Taiwan Strait problem? We can just go to China and say, shit, shit. And then we go to Taiwan and say, shit, shit. And that's it. And that's all we have to do. That should be enough. Whatever happened in the Taiwan Strait, that's a problem between mainland China and Taiwan. This is none of our problem. Why do we have to deal with it? So
that set him off. That had to set him off. I mean, because from the U.S. point of view, South Korea is one of our platforms for China. And if one of the opposition candidates is coming out saying, hey, why are we doing this? Oh, that is going to get a poor eye from the West.
That made him the pro-Beijing Manchurian candidate. All he said was like, look, we're Korea. We have nothing to do with like whatever the tension in the Taiwan Strait. Why can't we just carry out normal trading relations? Well, very sensible a suggestion for a nominally sovereign country, right? But that was seen as like he's pro-Beijing. He's a communist. He's a North Korean sympathizer. He's a hostile state force that was going to subvert South Korea. So that necessitated the martial law and sending South Korean special forces to arrest the lawmakers. And this, by the way, the team of the South Korean special forces they sent is whose main task is to assassinate major North Korean leaders in case of war.
That's who they sent to parliament?
Yes. And during the coup, as the coup was happening, the special forces that blocked the parliament building to prevent the South Korean parliament to convene an emergency meeting to call off the coup. And during that time, while the lawmakers were being blocked, so the South Korean president Yoon sent a direct message to the military at the scene of National Assembly. He said, they don't have quorum yet. Get in there and drag them out. And so, but I mean, credit to the South Korean lawmakers. They actually climb over the fence to get inside the building.
Oh man, they were doing God's work that night. I swear. Yeah.
Props for their athleticism and the defense of South Korean democracy.
These are like 60-year-old men. They're climbing over stuff. Yeah, I was impressed. I mean, I was legitimately impressed. I mean, because a coup happens. All right. It's supposed to go to Parliament, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong. Parliament is supposed to be able to get a say, a yay or nay, on whether or not the martial law goes through. The president explicitly forbade Parliament from assembling, which is just outrageous, right? That is literally going against the law in and of itself. And South Korea, the public and the politicians immediately went into action. Like full stop, went into action. As you said, jumping over people, getting into parliament, like streaming to the parliamentary building, holding back the military from getting in. You saw all these people with cameras and everything else. I mean, just a shocking scene. And that is mind-blowing to me, that what they use the pretext to that's not mind-blowing at all. This is the US we're talking about, right? Like, South Korea is supposed to be our platform in Asia in order to go against China. If they are going off the reservation, maybe South Korea needs a little bit of freedom. Maybe they need a little bit of freedom. I can totally see in their minds that being cooked up, either being told or at the very least pushing the dial for that. That is shocking to me. Is it so? Under South Korean law, the president is currently now being investigated. They have blown off impeachment, which is, again, mind-blowing, considering that the man literally tried to take over the government. What now?
Remember all the reaction from the U.S. press about January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Now look at what they say about South Korea, which is like nothing. There's like, we have
Silence.
nothing to comment. We don't know anything. We were surprised just as you are. And it's this is much more serious than January 6th, by the way. They had
Oh,
special
absolutely.
military trained to assassinate North Korean leaders, to drag out lawmakers from the National Assembly. And it turns out I'm just reading the new report that's coming out during the
Mm-hmm.
investigation. So apparently the initial preparation for the coup was started back in 2023. The military held exercise for they compiled like an operational menu for what they do under martial law situation. And so it's not a win. It's not like the South Korean president feel
This was
lonely
planned.
and decided his cure for male loneliness is to launch a self coup. They prepared this well in advance for like what went down. I mean, this is amazing stuff. I mean, I'm really happy for the South Korean people that this was stopped right in its track. It's and I'm really happy that the South Korean media is actually doing their job to digging
Mm-hmm.
out all the dirt right now. So props to them for that.
Well,
And
they were involved. I mean, the media was going to be shut down. I mean, they were literally under the martial law edict, so they themselves would have been under, managed. So yeah, they have a dog in this hunt, right? Like, if they want to be able to remain relatively free, they better be against this. They better be against it. By the way, are they still sleeping in the parliamentary buildings? From my understanding, after this happened, they were so worried that there was going to be martial law again that they were staying in the building.
Well, yeah, that night was pretty tense. And it turns out the plan for coup was actually calling for 2 more units of special forces outside of Seoul to come into the capital on the second day of the martial law to back up the first unit that surrounded the parliament building. So the parliamentary meeting convened that night put a stop to that. I mean, this was just in time. This was how close the coup come to being a success. Is these very brave lawmakers? They climb over the building. They live stream it on the internet, so everybody in South Korea saw what was happening, and then they annulled the martial law by the president. So this is actually. I mean, I'm laughing now, but back then that was very serious for the
Oh
South Korean
man, I
people.
was freaked out. I mean, it sounds weird for me to say I'm freaked out about something that's happening on the other side of the world, but the notion that the country devolves into a dictatorship right before our eyes is pretty mind blowing. And then my first thought too was, are they going to shoot cops or are they going to shoot protesters? Like, are they going to shoot congressmen or lawmen? Like, how far are they willing to go with this? I mean, they were good. From my point of view, it's going to devolve into a civil war. Like, if the cops decide, well, I don't want to shoot South Koreans. If the military decide, I don't want to shoot South Koreans, okay, well, you have a civil war on your hands, right? Like, it could have turned extraordinarily bad. I'm just blown away that the cure for male loneliness is a dictatorship. Who the hell knew? Who knew? I mean, we could have been solving so many issues with incels and whatnot. No, please.
By the way, if it wasn't for the South Korean auto coup, nobody in the U.S. is even aware that President Yoon is immensely unpopular in South Korea. I mean, his like approval rating is like 13% or something like that, and this is why he's launching the self coup. Only thing we know is he went to the White House and sang American Pie to Biden, and that was actually seen was incredibly embarrassing in
It's
South
humiliating.
Korea because they thought that was they saw that was obviously he was kissing Biden's ass, and they thought it was undignified for a national leader to do that.
It is.
And he is even more unpopular for agreeing to the U.S. plan to join the trilateral military alliance that U.S. put together with South Korea, Japan, and United States. And a lot of people in South Korea are like, why are we in bed with our former colonizer, Japan, which is still have a lot of historical issues that they yet to confront with the World War II war crimes? Why are we forming a military alliance with Japan? And this is why the Yoon unpopularity kind of nosedived, because nobody wanted in South Korea wanted to be in a military alliance with Japan. That didn't make sense, but it made sense for United States to put South Korea and Japan together, because U.S. plan is to have all these vassal states all the ducks lying together to contain China, and South Korea is very important.
But that's what I was going to ask you. Is do you think that what was going on in, let's say, the planners' head in this, whether it was the U.S., I have a hard time believing that the U.S. wasn't involved in this, especially after the comment of the guy saying, why are we involved in this kind of military conflict? Even though the U.S. has access to the South Korean military, where they can, in time of war, they could basically call up the military. Do you think that the U.S. was concerned that South Korea wasn't necessarily a full ally in this case, meaning that the parliament or the president, especially if it's a new president, considering this one is most likely going to lose the next election, that's assuming he even make it to the next election, that they could decide, well, no, we don't want this military deal. We don't want to go to war with China. We don't want to have this conflict. Meaning that South Korea could assert actual democracy and make a choice secondary to what might be in U.S. interest, especially if it's getting into some kind of conflict or some kind of war with China going forward. Is it that they didn't trust South Korea? And I guess let me ask this in two ways. Is it that they didn't trust South Korea, A, and B, they were concerned that Donald Trump would try to make peace with North Korea?
Well, I mean, U.S. has always been annoyed with South Korean public sentiment about not military allying themselves with Japan, because the trilateral military alliance U.S. put together between U.S., Japan, and South Korea, that's like the U.S. project for a long time. And they were really upset that how dare you Koreans let your historical memories get into the way, how dare you to let your feelings get into the way of our grand strategy to contain China. And the Yoon is, like I said, he's immensely unpopular. So it looks like he's gonna lose the election, not just the presidency, but all the and all the the parliament majority as well. So U.S. is worried that South Korea might strike a more independent foreign policy stance. I mean, South Korea has always been abiding by kind of the U.S. guideline, more or less, and no matter under conservative or the left-leaning parties. The difference is degree. U.S. wants someone like you who follow U.S. unquestionably, and even at the detriment of his own popularity inside South Korea. And this is why U.S. like about him. It's like, oh, this is the guy we want to work with. He's willing to embarrass himself in the White House to sing American Pie to Biden. This is our guy. And so, and this is why they would not allow even a slight deviation. U.S. do not have allies. We say South Korea is our ally, but U.S. do not have ally. We only have vassal states, and this is why they try to beat down any kind of dissent from the U.S. main objective, which in East Asia is to contain China. So U.S. remain number one.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I want to show you this clip. Now, in every war plan or every war game exercise that I'm aware of against China, the U.S. loses. We lose, right? It's an outpost. It's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to attack it? A has nuclear weapons, it has missiles, it has all of that stuff. Your boats are going to get crushed. So this guy apparently didn't get the memo. And listen to what he says. I want to get your take on this.
The advantage lies with us because our last combat was captured on somebody's iPhone 14. The Chinese's last combat was captured on oil and canvas. And they should not forget that. It is easy to bluster, but it's another thing when you actually have to go toe to toe and go in harm's way. And we have a lengthy history of going in harm's way. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, we've built a culture of warrior excellence. We've built a culture of war fighting. We've built a culture of interoperability in the joint force. The PRC has not yet had to deal with that. They haven't had to deal with that in decades. So I would not undersell the value that our combat experience brings to this fight. Because again, their last combat was captured on oil and canvas.
So because that's outrageous, right? China's last war was captured with oil canvas, and our was captured with iPhones. And because we go to war constantly in all of these failing campaigns, I mean, we ran with our tail between our legs in Afghanistan. Iraq was a dumpster fire, to put it mildly, even though we still occupy it. He thinks that this means that we are going to win that war with China.
I mean, China still have photographs from the Korean War. They still have photographs of the Chosin Reservoir when Chinese army is escorting the rows of American POWs. But you know what? He's right. China do not have decades of experience bombing weddings, shooting up women and children at checkpoints. I mean, U.S. have racked up a lot of experience shooting cowherders in Afghanistan and Iraq. And then he's also right. The last U.S. combat experience was captured with iPhone at Kabul airport when U.S. turned the tail and ran. And so there's a lot of people are keep on talking. Oh, U.S. have so much combat experience. Well, what was the last major war the U.S. has won? I mean, the U.S. right now can't even deal with Houthi. U.S. Navy, U.S. naval officer was quoted on air saying, "This is the most important naval engagement we have been involved in since World War II." He's talking about U.S. operation in the Red Sea. And then you have people posting like, oh, they're about to find out why we Americans don't have health care. Well, Houthis never find out why U.S. don't have health care. Because right now Yemen is a major naval power, apparently, because they're redirecting a huge chunk of the world marine traffic around the Horn of Africa right now. And all the U.S. Service fleet got the hell out of Red Sea, and they went to see either Mediterranean or Persian Gulf. And they expect to somehow be able to take on China. I mean, he talked about bluster. The only one that's blustering is himself. But in the Washington bubble, unfortunately, a lot of the people in the leadership position in the Pentagon, unfortunately, think just like this guy. He thinks, okay, we have all these experience. You know, what experience? You're fighting. You have not fought a peer competitor since forever. Since forever. And the last time U.S. and China went to toe didn't really work out very nicely.
North Korea
for U.S.
The Korean War.
Chinese army pushed the U.S. Forces from Yalu River all the way back to Seoul. So I don't know what he's talking about, but people have a lot of conviction that somehow shooting people at checkpoints in Baghdad equates to some kind of I mean, if anything, Ukraine war have shown us modern war in 21st century is nothing like these guys have seen before.
Yeah, it's different.
If anything, it's the Russians that have real combat experience in the 21st century war fighting against a peer military. U.S. don't have that. And if you look at, they said, oh, we gave Ukraine all this NATO equipment. We gave them all this NATO training. What happened? They got pulverized. They got pulverized by the Russian military. And if anything, these Ukrainians fighting in Ukraine. They have more combat experience than the American military, that going against Russians head to toe. So this is ridiculous. This is just crazy talk.
You know what's wild about that? When the U.S. kept telling Ukraine, well, you need to use this type of military exercise. What do they say? Combined arms warfare. You must use combined armed warfare. And Ukrainians were like, this doesn't work in this battlefield. And, I think your point is right. I mean, it's one thing if you're shooting, like Iraq was not a peer competitor. Afghanistan clearly was not a peer competitor. You flying drones over a country and shooting people, civilians, it's not the same thing, right? This war would end up most likely being a nuclear war. And like that level of bluster is terrifying to me. Carl, I'm going to have to close it. Man, thank you for this. Like I said, I always learn something every time we talk. Thank you for the breakdown of what's going on in South Korea, man. Carl Jha, he's host of Silk and Steel podcasts focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. Follow their podcasts on Twitter at Steel Silk In, and subscribe to and support their podcasts on patreon.com at Silk and Steel. Thank you, my man. I appreciate this, Carl. Thank you.
Thank you,
Oh,
Jamar.
excellent.